As a lawyer representing crash victims, I get asked all the time, why is it that people get away with reckless driving without any criminal charges, even when they severely injure or kill people? You know, I happen to be standing here where 2 people were killed just 48 hours ago, Saturday morning, at the foot of the Manhattan Bridge. Now, the driver in that case is being charged with manslaughter, but there are so many cases in which drivers who kill don't even receive a criminal charge. They may not even receive a traffic ticket, even when it's entirely their fault, because the system treats it as an oopsie. It's a mistake, right? Well, that's really the crux of it, is what do we consider criminal and what do we consider merely negligent and perhaps a suitable basis for a lawsuit that a lawyer might bring, but no basis for a criminal penalty or even the revocation of a license of a driver, right? So the difference is, the concept, I explain it with this idea of pigeonholes of criminality. Cops are looking for what they call criminality, and it's not bad driving. Cops don't really think it's their job to punish people or hold them accountable for bad driving, no matter how much harm they cause. They're going after quote-unquote criminals. What are the pigeonholes of criminality? Well, driving without a license, hit and run, driving while impaired or drunk, and driving while fleeing the scene of a crime or while committing a crime, right? So if you do any of those things, the cops will stand up and take note. You know, it used to be that impaired or drunk driving, up until, say, the mid-70s, wasn't really much of a crime at all. It was more of a folk crime. And frankly, hit and run in New York City without severe injuries is also considered something of a folk crime and not seriously investigated and prosecuted, right? With no accountability. So the cops are looking for what they consider a really meaty kind of criminality in a case like this. Unlicensed driver, not a big deal. I've had drivers who were unlicensed who struck and severely injured one and then went on to kill someone. And they still face no criminal consequences. You know, in this case, there were criminal consequences because the 2 women were in a car that was in essence stolen from the car rental agency. They checked it out a month ago. I don't know how long they were supposed to have it, but not a month. They were still driving around. God knows why these cordon cameras that we paid $500 million to erect surrounding the congestion zone in lower Manhattan didn't detect these women driving around in the car for a month, you know, but they didn't, right? We're not using the cameras for that purpose. We're using it just for tolling. You know, they had guns in their car, which definitely raised them in terms of the profile the cops were looking at. And the driver had a previous hit and run that she was allowed to just walk away from, apparently without any consequences. And that's what I'm talking about when I say there's so many hit and runs. There's so many cases of reckless driving resulting in injuries, and the police don't view it as their fundamental part of their job to visit enforcement action and investigation and accountability on the drivers responsible for it. People do it again and again, and that's what happened here. So yes, there's going to be a homicide prosecution of the driver. Her passenger, who's the one who rented and then stole the car from the car rental agency, I suppose she'll be charged and prosecuted for that as well. They had some guns in the car. I guess there'll be some consequences for that. They did kill 2 people while they were committing those other crimes, so I think actually it aggravates, you know, the liability for the other offenses like having guns in the car, and it could be that they're looking at actual like felony murder charges. But what about the fatal crashes that happen in New York City every week, virtually every day? Hundreds of people killed in New York City by drivers. And we treat it as an oopsie unless the driver falls into one of these pigeonholes of criminality. Being unlicensed doesn't necessarily mean anything. They can walk away. I've seen it happen. You know, being uninsured happens all the time. You know, people need to have consequences when they do a criminal act in a car and perpetrate traffic violence, even if there isn't a serious or severe injury or a death. And maybe then they will be limited in their access to cars if there's enforcement and accountability for those earlier gateway offenses with the cars. Or maybe they'll learn and they'll change their behavior. We won't find out unless we start investigating, prosecuting, enforcing the laws against traffic violence, even when there isn't a severe or fatal consequence. And that is the most fundamental problem, is without that consequence, people view it as an oopsie, a big nothing, a glass of spilled milk. And then by the time the person emboldened by all those slaps on the wrist or being allowed to walk occasions, when they kill someone, then we say, oh, it was a terrible accident. We use that word accident. We talk about how the driver lost control of the car, which is what they're saying about this particular crash. You don't lose control of a car coming off of that bridge with that clear marking, with the bollards, the stripes, the barrier, and then even this mound of bricks that goes up as much as a yard high off the sidewalk. To try to make clear this is supposed to be a safe place, a refuge for pedestrians. There was a bench here that a woman was sitting on. The driver took out the bench and the woman, took out a bicyclist who was right here, and went all the way to the other side of the street and hit the jeweler's exchange, taking out several other cars along the way. That's losing control of a car? How can we even talk about it in those sorts of terms? What were they doing that they could possibly lose all control of that car? I guess we'll find out again. They had guns, they had a stolen car, they were young, one of them had a prior record, they were black. There's all these factors that raise their profile for the police. We'll see the system work in their case until we see the system work in all the cases of traffic violence resulting in harm. We're going to see crashes like this again and again. We're going to see the people of Chinatown and every other community in New York City coming out to mourn the victims of traffic violence. And that's what we've got to change.